All set to go. Namaste. Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for coming to the monthly lecture series of Bharati Vichar Manch. Today, to talk to us, we have Swami Bodhanandaji. Bodhanandaji he has come here twice before. For those of you who are new today, we meet once a month. This is our monthly intellectual discourse forum where we debate and discuss ideas, basically. And a brief introduction of Swami Bodhanandaji. He teaches Advaita Vedanta, Yoga Sutras, Bhagavad Gita and Upanishads from the Sambodh Society. And they have a website which is there in the email that we sent. Swamiji is a well-known expert in, he has a mix of both the traditional management science area. He has a master's degree in economics as well as a very well-accomplished Swamiji with training under Puji Guruji since 1978. He received training in Sandipani Ashram in Kerala, and many of his students of that era are very well-accomplished Swamijis. He has written multiple books, and the book that is featured is called Indian Management and Leadership. Okay, the sample books are in the back if you are interested. So today's lecture is being recorded so that we can put it on the website. Today's topic is about Hinduism, secularism, and market-driven development. Okay, so Swamiji, please.
Thank you. Thank you very much. The topic Hinduism, secularism, and market-driven development in the context of Narendra Modi's spectacular victory in the recent parliamentary elections. We all are excited about his convincing, very, very convincing victory. He has got absolute majority in the parliament, lower house of Indian parliament in the Lok Sabha, and now he is the master of Indian politics. And in India, Narendra Modi evokes strong reactions. There are a considerable number of people who support him wholeheartedly. There is another section of people who dislike him, rather hate him. And so that itself shows he is a powerful person, that he can evoke strong emotions in the people. He has got clear vision, and he could communicate it very powerfully and to the people, and people gave their trust to him. And I feel that Narendra Modi will go on ruling India for another 10 years. He may be winning 3 elections consecutively, and the third election, halfway through, he may hand over power to a younger leader as per his principle. His principle is after 75 you must retire and become a sannyasi, an advisor, a director, not an executive. That's his philosophy. And Narendra Modi has deep roots in Indian philosophy, Indian spiritual tradition. He is a sannyasi in his mindset, though he is not wearing the ochre robe, though he was not teaching Vedanta or spirituality. As far as I can see, he is a sannyasi. He knows Sanskrit, he practices yoga, and he selflessly served the nation for so many years. He has been an RSS Pracharak from the very childhood. So he has very incredible background, credential to be the leader of India. So Hindu Dharma. What exactly is Hindu Dharma? To put it in one sentence, Hindu Dharma is a worldview where we see existence as a set of relationships. We all are related to each other. I am related to you, you are related to me. And we human beings are related to the animal world, the plant world, the mineral world. And the entire planet Earth is related to the solar system. Solar system is part of the Milky Way. And the whole thing is part of the universe. So we are part of something else, and that something else is part of some higher whole. So this kind of an idea, to exist is to coexist. Self-promotion is promoting the other, kind of enlightened self-interest. So that's Hindu Dharma. And the definition of Dharma is that which sustains you. It's a very secular definition, that which sustains you. It's a very scientific definition. Anything that which sustains you is Dharma. And secularism, as far as I can see, is a rational approach to human problems. A scientific, rational approach to human problems. That is what secularism is all about. And also a value system based on human experience. Not based on some revelatory principles, set of principles, but based upon our own collective human experience, you create a value system. That's another aspect of secularism. And secularism in practice means the state should not interfere in matters of faith. At the same time, the state provides space for different faiths to flourish. State is not against a religion, as it was practiced in the communist countries. That's not secularism. Secularism is sarva dharma samabhavana, Maitri Bhava. So first, a rational approach to human problem. Second, value system based upon collective human experience. Third, state does not interfere in faith. And fourth, state provides a space for different faith to flourish. These are the four aspects of secularism. And the Hindu Dharma is in agreement with that principle. Because the Hindu Dharma says that God can be conceived in many ways, God can be approached through many paths, and all these paths will direct you to the divine or lead you to the divine experience. So, as a result of that, Hinduism developed an idea of ahimsa. Ahimsa is a non-violent modality of settling disputes. And there can be disputes about God, or about values, or about what is good for humankind. There can be disputes. And these disputes can be settled not by violent means, but by non-violent means. That humans have enough intelligence to sit together and define our problem and offer solutions to those problems. And Hindu Dharma is not opposed to that idea. And somehow or other, for the last 67 years, during the independence struggle and after independence, after India became a republic, this idea of secularism has been one central pillar of Hindu state, this Indian state, not Hindu state, Indian state. Secularism has been a central pillar. Mahatma Gandhi supported it. Mahatma Gandhi was a deeply religious person. But he did not want to bring his religion into the affairs of the state. That's why probably he wanted Jawaharlal Nehru to be the Prime Minister of India, because he thought secularism will be safe in Nehru's hands. So Mahatma Gandhi, Rabindranath Tagore, even Swami Vivekananda, from that standpoint, was a secularist. But secularism is not opposed to Hinduism, because the Indian state understands that the security and the unity of India depends upon Hindu worldview. Even the security people understand that. The security experts understand that. If Hinduism become a minority religion in India, India can again be divided into many independent countries. So, as secularism has got a place in India, Hindu Dharma is the very foundation of Indian culture, Indian ethos and Indian worldview, and democracy would not have been a success had there been no Hinduism in India. Because we have seen Pakistan or Bangladesh, Pakistan democracy did not survive much, and Bangladesh is slowly developing democracy. And in Indonesia, 30 years there was dictatorship. It's only in India we find democracy surviving. So Hindu Dharma, secularism, democracy, and pluralism, and the scientific worldview, all those things go together. They are not opposed to each other. It is in this context I appreciate Narendra Modi's arrival in the center stage of Indian politics. Narendra Modi is deeply a religious person, spiritual person, but at the same time he is a worldly person, a good politician. So somehow or other in his personality we see a healthy combination of spirituality and politics. A healthy combination. Because India has always been dubbed as a spiritual country. Meaning, obliquely it means that India is otherworldly. Indians cannot deal with the material issues of life. And they quote examples. After 67 years of independence, India is still poor. 70% of Indians live below the poverty line. The Indians are not capable of lifting themselves materially or asserting themselves politically on the world arena because of this overdose of spirituality. So what we need, a healthy balance between spirituality and materialism. And in Narendra Modi, we find the symbol, the emblem, the metaphor of that healthy combination between spirituality and materialism. Where the Indian Hindu Dharma talks about the four goals, Artha, Dharma, Kama, and Moksha, in the right proportion. In the right proportion, we have to mix all this. Dharma should not be at the cost of Artha. Artha should not be at the cost of Moksha. None of them should be at the cost of Kama. So we need a healthy combination of all this. So we have been struggling all this while to connect Hindu Dharma with a modern idea of a state. The modern idea of politics, economics, international relations. We have been struggling to connect. And I find in Modi, so I really admire Modi. I find in Modi that he is able to combine all these values in his personality, in his political philosophy, and the way he campaigned in the last election. So I see Modi has brought a revolution in Indian politics. Just as Barack Obama brought a revolution in American politics. Though he could not carry on with that revolution because of the very complex nature of American politics and America's place in the world. No particular individual can create such a radical shift. It is like turning a huge tanker 180 degree is not that easy. So, though Obama brought in revolutionary ideas, the very fact that a black could sit in the White House, a black family could sit in the White House, that itself is a revolution. So Modi, belonging to a very poor family, a backward caste, who was selling tea in the railway stations, coming up at the age of 63, he has become the undisputed leader of India. Itself shows the revolution that he brought into Indian politics. And he also is a continuation where Mahatma Gandhi left, where Sardar Patel left. Mahatma Gandhi united India for independence. Sardar Patel united India as one single state. Though we could not incorporate Pakistan and Bangladesh into that free Indian state, but considerable that 563 independent states were united, amalgamated into the Indian Republic. So Modi is taking up from there. So I see in 5 areas that he has created the revolution. You may agree with me, you may disagree with me. This forum is an intellectual forum, as it was said. Intellectual forum means where you debate different ideas. It is not that you put one idea and then you say yes, yes, yes. That's not the idea here. You bring different perspective. But the same issue, deliberately you bring different perspective. Because for an intellectual, for a public intellectual, truth is in the clash of ideas. You are bringing different ideas to shine upon the issue so that you can nuance the best thoughts, best ideas out of this discussion. The first thing Modi did was, that I could see, he sidelined the old entrenched power centers in BJP. Lal Krishna Advani, Murli Manohar Joshi, Jaswant Singh, Jaswant Sinha, and other people who are entrenched power centers, who has been following a certain style of politics, which indeed lifted BJP from its abysmal state to a recognizable party in India. But their role was over. But they are hanging on like the old man that's in Sinbad. They are hanging on to the Indian politics. They outlived their utility for Indian politics. And they are not ready to leave. And we were not willing to ask them to quit. Though Indian tradition says after 75 you must leave. And they say Hindu Dharma. But this particular aspect of Hindu Dharma they were not following. Dhoni wanted to be the Prime Minister at the age of 86. He should have retired and repaired into the Himalayas and sat in a cave and contemplated for the well-being of the world, or reading Bhagavad Gita and the Upanishad. No, he wanted to be the Prime Minister. So this was against Hindu Dharma. So Modi had the gumption and the guts to say, I respect you, I touch your feet, but leave for God's sake. So Advani, Murli Manohar Joshi, another 85-year-old person. And they all were sidelined. They were put in the mouthboard into Indian politics. They were put in the back. And that gumption he had. Advani wanted to be the speaker, if not the deputy prime minister or the home minister. He said, no, I want a lady speaker. So Miss Mahajan became the speaker. And so this gumption of the courage, the political courage, Prime Minister Modi showed. It shows that there is steel in your soul. It's a person of courage, power, decision, ability to take difficult decisions. So he sidelined. Not only he sidelined these entrenched power centers so that young people can come. One of his ministers, and a very important ministry, HRD, Human Resource Development Ministry, very important ministry, is a 38-year-old woman who has no college degree. He put her in that seat. Because you know that most of these educated people, their mind is all influenced by old Western ideas. They are all educated there or educated in the Indian universities. So it is better an illiterate sit there, so that there is some fresh ideas. And mind you, she is not a simpleton. She is a good communicator. Smriti Irani is a good communicator. Her body language is very good. She can take a decision with the help of some good advisors. What you need is a fresh mind in the Indian education. That's a bold move by Narendra Modi. So he sidelined the entrenched power centers in the Indian politics, in BJP, and he also put some of the political ideas in the back burner, become leading political ideas, which BJP has been campaigning. One is the Raman temple. That's one of the central pillar of its political campaign, that there should be a temple is to be built in Ayodhya, Raman temple. It's a good position. It's a very powerful idea, but the time must not come. This is not the way to do it. There should be a way of doing it. So Ram temple, he did not insist this time. It's not only Ram temple, there's a Krishna temple in Mathura and Varanasi. These are the three temples we have to revive, like we revived the Somnath temple in Gujarat. But this time will come. Time will come. Till such time we have to wait. Similarly, Article 370. That is another poll issue that BJP used to raise every election manifesto. Modi did not talk about this time. And the third was Common Civil Code. He did not talk about this time. So neither Common Civil Code or Rama Temple or the Article 370 was political or poll issues, campaign issues this time. He put it in the back. So I think this is quite a humongous task. There were a politician coming from Gujarat who has no background in the national politics. And it's not only he did that, he communicated to the people. So Modi's advantage is he's a good communicator. Beautiful Hindi. If you listen to Hindi speeches, you will feel electrified. Even not electrocuted, electrified. And he could communicate thousands of people, millions of people, and through simple language, very powerful, touching their heart. And people used to, difficult ideas after his speeches, I used to hear some comments from people, difficult ideas they could easily catch. So Modi established a communication with the masses. After Nehru, he was the person. Even Vajpayee couldn't do that. Vajpayee was very poetic, long-winding, pauses. So he was a good orator, spectacular orator. But I doubt whether he was a good communicator. That's a lot of difference between oratory and communication. It is like a definition of magnum opus. A magnum opus means your best work. A magnum opus is that which everybody buys but nobody reads.
Why?
because difficult to understand. Similarly, Vajpayee's speeches were very profound, but nobody understood. But Modi, his speeches were not that poetic or profound, but he could communicate complex ideas in simple language. So he went over the party, over the leaders, straight to the people. That is why Modi could move the people. Otherwise, do you think he will get, BJP could have gotten 72 seats in the UP? Difficult. Even Assam Khan's parliamentary constituency, BJP bagged this time. Assam Khan is a very powerful Muslim leader. One of his chelas told that, I will cut Modi into pieces. Because of that, he got more votes. And Manish Shankar Iyer said he chaiwala. Because of that, he got another 1 million votes. So whenever these people open their mouth, Modi gets more votes. Chai pe charcha hua. So therefore, Modi could directly communicate over the heads of these people, over the head of the party. And that was a great revolution. After Nehru, Modi was the person. That is what brought the votes. That's why leaders became speechless. They couldn't explain this phenomenon. How did he get an absolute majority in the lower house of parliament? They could not explain. They always thought that it will be a hung parliament. It is a hung parliament, an absolute majority. This was something, a miracle that happened in India. It is sheerly because of charisma and the personality of Modi. 100% marks. Not 2 cheers, 3 cheers for Modi for this. It was a spectacular victory. So that was the first thing. The first thing is he put all these entrenched leaders in the back burner, and you could communicate straight to the people. So the party also became helpless. Party has to move with the Modi, not that Modi with the party. Meaning Modi was in command of the party. Otherwise, do you think Amit Shah can become the president of BJP? Because the BJP practice is the Prime Minister and the party president shouldn't be from the same state. Amit Shah is from Gujarat. Narendra Modi is from Gujarat. So Gujarat is dominating the Indian politics now. And it has been dominating. Mahatma Gandhi and Patel. Patel dominated Congress party and Mahatma Gandhi the national politics. Similarly, it is the force of his personality. So I don't say that Modi has forgotten these 3 issues: Rama Temple, or Article 370, or Common Civil Code, or Hindi as a national language. He has not forgotten. So please don't think Sanskrit can become the national language. That's not possible. It has never been. Sanskrit has never been the language of the masses in India. Sanskrit was the language of the elite, the scholars, like a Latin, the language of the scholars. Sanskrit will be our mother language, mother tongue, not the lingua franca or the national. It has to be Hindi. And Hindi has got acceptance now. Even in Tamil Nadu, people have accepted Hindi. Maybe because of the Bollywood, I don't know. The Bollywood movies or the other national channels. Even in Tamil Nadu, there is acceptance for Hindi. Kerala has already accepted Hindi. Bengal, or Andhra, or Karnataka, or Punjab, all of them have accepted it. So it is a matter of time that Hindi will become India's national language, higher language of higher education, research, communication, and in the administration, everywhere Hindi will be the national. Highly Sanskritized Hindi. Not just the Khadipoli Hindi, highly Sanskritized Hindi. Research scholars for explaining new ideas, they will go to the Sanskrit roots and find words, new words to explain new ideas.